Jessica, your favorite MC. So fun fact, I didn't know any of these speakers before today, so they're really enjoying me, like, knowing all these random facts and spending like 2 hours on each of their profiles. It's been super fun. I've reached out to all your colleagues. Like, tell me fun facts about you. So we're going to welcome Glenn from Auth0. Glenn is the director of product at Auth0, and clearly you're a very adventurous person from your Twitter. There's like skydiving on his like background photo, and then I think you're like playing in the snow with the profile picture. And then this is the best fun fact that I got from your coworkers. Glenn was in the Grand Canyon, and like this most like beautiful, serene area.
Oh my God!
And then he FaceTimes his wife, and the entire time he's like, "Can you hear me now? How about now? Can you hear me now?" And that
I know who told you this.
Yeah, I don't know. I have many sources. You'll never know.
I'm impressed.
Yeah. So that's really cool.
The best part of the story is I actually ran into somebody about 1,500 feet higher after hiking through the canyon. She's like, "Is that you? Was that you who was on your phone?"
So Glenn does many adventures. Also, he's very passionate about contributing to open source projects and making our lives easier with code. An OG JavaScript person. I saw some old cool logos for JavaScript from 2012.
Yeah, I put on a conference in Shanghai.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that later, so that's pretty cool. And so today we're going to hear about serverless extensibility from within, and really looking forward to it. So with that, I'll let you take it from here.
Yes, and I'm very thankful that Abe has told everybody what serverless is, so I don't have to go into the basics of what that is. Great to be here with everybody. Thanks for having me. So I work for Auth0, and we have actually multiple products. Our main product is an identity product. Anybody here ever use Auth0 or heard of it? So yeah, okay, great. So we actually have a new product for extensibility, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. This is not a product talk, but I will mention it. And that is what I run. So we're kind of like a startup within a startup, Auth0 Extend. Anybody here heard of Extend? I didn't think you would. So this is Extend. You can find a little bit more about it, and I'll mention it a bit later. Okay, so let's just jump right in. Of course, Abe is a really hard act to follow. That was an awesome talk. So you've shipped your SaaS product. You're pretty excited about that. That's really awesome. Anybody here work on SaaS products? Okay. So immediately after that, you're going to start getting all these customer requests that are coming in. And you're going to have to figure out, like, how can you handle all those requests? How can you keep up? And what do you do? So you might decide to start pouring all that stuff into the product. And if you do, one, you're going to have a real challenge because those requests are going to be coming faster than you're probably going to have resource to address all of those concerns. So you're really going to have to pick and choose. But the other problem is, your product's going to turn into a mess. And we've seen this kind of happening. And engineering always loves when sales is driving features in, and then suddenly it becomes something horrible to try to maintain, and it's really, really confusing. So there are other options that you have. Really popular one is webhooks. Woohoo! Webhooks solve the problem, right? So anybody here is familiar with webhooks? It's kind of like the most common way that we enable extensibility today. And the advantage of webhooks is now we're allowing customers that use our product, we basically kind of turning our product into a platform. We're allowing customers to come along and say, hey, you can do whatever you want. It's great. And I don't have to build those customizations, so awesome. I don't have to host them. I know that the code that you're going to be writing is going to run in a secure manner because I'm calling out to some external system that's your problem. You can choose whatever language that you want to implement it in, which is really, really cool and is relatively straightforward to implement. And why I say that is anybody who's actually built webhooks knows that they're deceptively simple to like write a couple of lines of code and write a webhook. But in actuality, you're writing an API. So for that API to actually operate at scale, there's actually quite a bit of work there to do that right. But although it's great for you, it's really not that great for your customer because the first one is they have to build this webhook. They have to figure out like how they're going to build it. As I said, it really is a service. So building something that's going to be robust, that's going to be able to handle outages, all these other kinds of things. And you're going to have to host it somewhere. You're running an API, so you're going to have to figure that out. Now, if you're just coming to a product and you're saying, hey, I want to go use this product like Twilio, you're going to have to say, well, all right, so I need to build something. I need to learn about Heroku. What's that? I need to learn about serverless helps but it's still sign up for a separate account, go somewhere else to host this thing. Then, once I have it set up and I finally have it built and deployed, I'm going to need to monitor it. I'm going to need to monitor it forever, and I'm going to be paying for it in an ongoing fashion. So because of that, what we see is although lots of platforms out there support webhooks, there's actually quite a barrier of entry of building just even a simple webhook. So a lot of companies will think really hard about, are we going to do this? Because it looks deceptively simple, but now we're getting in bed with something that we're going to have to deal with for a long time. In a big company, this is an even more of a challenge, and that's what this diagram is showing, is in a big company you have to deal with things like budgets, like different departments, like who's going to build it, who's going to pay for deploying it, who's going to pay for monitoring it, I need to work with my ops team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if it's like a really big SaaS product, like something like Salesforce, then I'm going to have to work with like a Salesforce integration team. So all of this is basically meaning it's taking much, much longer to deliver value. So can we go beyond webhooks? Is there anything else that we can do? And the answer is there is, and this is a place where serverless is actually starting to make a difference. So I use this term we started to use called serverless extensibility, and it's a new approach. So the idea of serverless extensibility is instead of having your product or your API exposing webhooks that now punts off to the customer that they have to figure out, how am I going to deploy this thing, how am I going to run it? Instead, what you actually do is you build your product on top of a serverless platform, and then you enable that ability for your customers to customize your platforms in such a way that they don't need to deploy anything. They have an in-product experience for extending the product. And so basically what this means, this got cut off on the bottom, is that your product, the way this works is that your product's going to have some hook points in it, which are going to be where your product can be extended. You have to kind of make that decision. You'll have to have some type of code editor embedded within the product, because the idea here is you want to make it as simple as possible. You want to remove all the friction, or as much friction as possible, for the user who's going to come along and extend this product. And then the third thing, which is not showing because it's cut off on my text, is having a serverless platform. Why have a serverless platform behind the scenes? Because it's just going to make your life as the SaaS provider much easier. You're not going to have to deal with deploying servers, standing them up, managing them. You're relying on the serverless provider to do that for you. So this is what serverless extensibility is about. Today, when people talk about serverless, what they're really talking about generally is infrastructure. Like for my product, I want to stand up a bunch of infrastructure. I want to do it really, really cheaply. I want to glue different services together that my product relies on. What this is doing is actually extending capability to your customer, and it's leveraging a serverless architecture to be able to do that. So what are the benefits that you get from doing that? Well, really, really fast ramp-up time. I can just, and I'm going to show you examples. I can just go right into the product. I want to do something. I can just do it. I don't have to install tools. I don't have to go anywhere else. I don't have to sign up for any kind of accounts. It really makes this much more approachable. We talked, Abe talked earlier about developer, like developer in quotes, right? So I just need to be able to write a little bit of code, and I can implement an extension to a product that if I was doing this in a webhook world would actually take way, way more work and way more knowledge. They don't have to sign up for any kind of account. They don't even have to monitor it. And they may not have to pay anything, or if they do pay, that's really up to the SaaS. The SaaS is going to make a decision and say, do I want to charge my customers for using this or not? So who's doing this? We've been doing this actually for 3 years. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do it, and then I'm going to talk about a very recent example of this, which is Twilio Functions. Has anyone here heard of Twilio Functions? Okay, one. Has anyone here used Auth0 rules in Auth0? Okay, so I'm going to start off, and how am I on time?
Good.
What does that mean? It's like, I'm good, great. Okay, that works perfectly. Well, I don't want to go off my slide deck, so let's not do that. So first I'm going to start with Auth0. So Auth0 is our identity product. And one of the things that we wanted to do with our identity product to make ourselves be really competitive in the market and even disruptive in the identity market was we wanted to make it really easy for customers to be able to customize what happens in Auth0 when users are logging in. This is like a big, so one of the common things for customers of Auth0 is they want to integrate with all different kinds of systems. Maybe they want to use something like Full Contact, which is an API that's out there that will enrich profile information. So they want to say that when a user logs in, I want to go out to Full Contact and pull some data. Maybe what they want to do is look at the IP address of the user, and as the user's coming in, if the IP address is in some block range, then that login will fail. This is just a couple of examples. There's tons of examples. And one of the things we found as we were selling Auth0, as we were trying to sell it into customers and going through a pre-sales motion, that often companies would say, we love this, but we need to integrate with XYZ. Has anyone here ever seen that in their companies when they're trying to sell their products or they're talking to their friends about their products? So what we did in Auth0, and we started this about 3 years ago, is we introduced this concept called rules. And you can see here where I can go and create a rule and let's see, access during certain days of the week. So what you see here is I actually get an editor right in line within the product where I can write some code. And that code is my custom rule. In this case, I'm showing a template. Now what happens when that actually executes at runtime? That is running on a serverless platform behind the scenes. So that ensures that it all runs at scale, it runs securely, and so this is giving that really, really rich experience to the customer. Think about this and think about the Webhooks model. A customer reads one of our quick starts and says, I want to build a rule that does XYZ. They just come into the product and it is like instant that they can get it done. Does that make sense? So this has all those all those components that I talked about, which is this, the extensibility points are defined within the product. In this case, the extensibility point is rules. We have the code editor and we have the serverless runtime. Another example is Twilio. So Twilio has their new Twilio Functions product. So if we go into Twilio prior to the functions world, and I will go to my phone number here. So Twilio is an interesting use case because, a lot of cases where people are doing extensibility, it's like a nice to have. But in Twilio's world, it's absolutely essential. If you use Twilio and you want to have any kind of handling for, say, when an SMS message comes through, in the prior world, you either had this one way of doing it with this thing called TWIML, which they added, which was the declarative model that had some limitations associated with it. Or what you could do is you could put a webhook. Well, that webhook meant you're back in that cycle that I talked about before. Where am I going to host it? How am I going to build it? All that other stuff. So they've now added this concept called a function. And so what they now have is the ability for you to go and select from functions, and you can write them right within Twilio. So if we go up here to runtime, you'll notice they now have functions. And some from functions, I can go and create a function. And similar to the way I had the templates that I showed you in Auth0, for rules, they have their own template. I can put this thing out there. I can call it, hello, save it. And then I can go back to the console, and you'll see that that drop-down should actually be populated. So if I go here, now when it says message comes in, I go to function, boom, you can, must not have saved it. That's interesting. Yeah, I must not have saved it. I'm not going to go back to it because of time. But anyway, it does work. I tested it before I came here. So again, same experience and same components. They have the editor, they have the extensibility points, in this case, which is like when messages come in or when phone calls come in, and then they've got the serverless runtime. So that is the pattern. You guys see it? Make sense? And more of this is happening. PubNub, who's been around for a while, has these things called PubNub blocks. They renamed them recently to PubNub Functions. Same idea. I want to customize PubNub, customize things that are happening as messages are flowing through. PubNub is a real-time messaging service. I can do that, and I can do it right within the product. And you're going to see more of this happening. And most of these, everybody who's doing this right now is doing it with a serverless platform. Either one that they build themselves, which we actually have our own, it's called Auth0 Web Tasks, or using something like Lambda, which is what Twilio is doing. So that gets to my last point, which is how can you do this? How can you do this in your SaaS? Well, you can build it, or we actually built this new product called Auth0 Extend. So what Auth0 Extend is really trying to do is enable you to have exactly the experiences that I showed you in any SaaS product without you having to do the heavy lifting. So if you look at, for example, what Twilio did, they had to build their own custom editor. They had to layer a whole bunch of stuff on top of Lambda. This is an out-of-the-box product for extensibility. So I'm going to show you a very quick demo of it, and then I will be done. So if I go to auth0.com/extend, we actually have a hosted sample called Xero CRM. So Xero CRM is like a fictitious CRM system, and you can actually get this yourself. I have links to it. You can clone this. It's open source, but the backend is not. But we have a freemium where you can use it. So if I go here and say, hey, I'm in a CRM system, a common thing is I'm going to go create leads. So I'm going to create a new lead. And you can see here that it says, hey, I created a lead called with a value of $5,000. There's also this profile information. Where is that coming from? So if I go into the settings of this app, you can see here that I have this on new lead. Now in a webhooks world, this would most likely be a text box where I go and paste the URL. I'm back in that cycle. Where am I going to host this thing, etc. But here I can literally just click edit. And I now get a place where I can write node code, and that node code is executing in a serverless platform, and it's running at the time when that lead is getting created. So this is a service that you could plug into any application. You just need to design it in a way that it's extensible, and you can use Auth0 Extend to get you all the way the rest of the miles. So like let's say I wanted in my CRM system to use Algolia. So we actually have support, and this is something that's pretty powerful about our platform. We have support for all of the NPM modules that are out there in the registry. You can basically just type in the module, and we can install it for you. What's the main one? Algolia Search, is it?
Yeah.
This one? Yeah. So I can just do that, add the module. It's instantly available. I can require it. I can use it. So this is now enabling customers to do whatever integrations they want using whatever modules are available in the NPM registry. Now let me make this clear. The product is not the CRM system. That is just a sample to illustrate how you would use the product. To show you how you would use the product, if you go over to auth0.com/extend/try, you can sign up. We have a React component, which is the editor. You just drop that editor. It's literally one line of code. You drop that editor into your application wherever you want to surface that for people to have access to it. You can customize it, customize the CSS, etc. And then you basically are putting other places in your backend code. You're calling out to an API. It's kind of like invoking a webhook. The difference is it's not a webhook that a customer is going to have to stand up the implementation. It's actually something that will execute on the fly using our product. So that, I think, closes up. I probably went slightly over, but want to thank you guys. And if you have any questions, gblock on Twitter. That's the source code for the sample. You can clone it, pull it down, and you can email me, glenn.block@auth0.com. Now I will hide my head in shame about the Grand Canyon story that was not supposed to get out. That was like one of those Vegas stories.
No, I had like another one. That was my good ones.
Oh, no.
Your coworkers, like, you should probably talk to them. There's some questions though.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
So with the NPM modules, I'm just curious, given some of the security problems that happen, how are you addressing security issues as they come up with the way you're running SaaS backend?
In terms of Node or in terms of NPM?
Insecure NPM packages that come up that also...
We have the ability to block. So we don't, so one thing, I could almost do a separate talk. We have a very sophisticated mechanism for dealing with NPM. We actually don't hit NPM all the time. We hit NPM once, we cache the result of all of the modules, including native modules, and then that is persisted into a store in S3. If we see that there's some type of security issue, we can actually either up the module or remove the module. So we do have the ability to address that if we need to. Yeah. Yes?
Can you still check in the code of your functions into Git, for instance?
Great question. So the editor out of the box supports GitHub integration. So if you host the editor, you can enable it to allow you to bind. The question was, do we support Git integration? We don't support generic Git integration. We do support GitHub integration with private repos. We are looking to add support for Bitbucket, and we may even add VS, Visual Studio Online, I think that's the name of it, support. So yeah, but we don't have generic Git, but that might be something that comes in the future. But we definitely do have source control support for storing those things in source. Yeah?
Yeah, one of the other challenges too is just like having multiple environments.
Yep.
You can test something out of that.
Sure.
Scalability and stuff.
Yep.
You kind of build out yourself as you're implementing this type of.
Actually, it's a great question. Actually, no. We actually have a baked-in concept called a container. It's a logical concept. Under the hood, so this is not using Lambda. This is not using Azure Functions. We were actually years before Lambda even existed, but we do use Docker. So we have Docker containers, and we have a logical concept, and you can basically say that I have different containers that are different environments. So we have an environments capability. We don't have a first-class environment. We have a concept of container that you can use for environments. We are looking to have more of like the dev test, prod model baked in. And as a preview, there's something coming in the future soon with that will bring some of that functionality.
2 more questions.
Yeah. Thank you guys, by the way, great questions.
So the name of the product is Auth0 Extend.
Correct.
Where does the authentication part come in?
It is not okay. So this is a challenge. Just like Amazon does more than books. Auth0 initially certainly carved its name around identity. This is something that our identity product actually uses, like I showed you how our Auth0 rule system. But we had a lot of requests from customers who said, we love what you guys did with rules. I'd like to do that in my product. So that's where the genesis of this really came from. But it doesn't have any tie to identity, other than you could integrate them from an auth perspective to say that, hey, like if somebody is going to invoke this, they have to have a JWT that is valid and authorized with Auth0. But other than that, it's not an identity product. Yes?
In terms of customer experience, how would you compare this to something like
Zapier?
Yeah.
The biggest difference I would say is that Zapier is a product that I have to sign up for a separate account, which is Zapier. And this runs, and Zapier is something that lives outside of the product. I go to Zapier, and Zapier will have a library of integration. By the way, it's awesome. I don't have anything bad to say about Zapier. The other thing about Zapier, if you go to their webpage, they will say right away that Zapier is really targeting non-developers. So a key thing about Zapier is making it really easy for a non-developer to kind of drag and drop their way in with integrations. This is all about targeting developers. So that's another key difference. So I would say in product, focused on developers. Now, we do have some customers that layer on top of our experience so that they're saying, I don't want everybody to have to write code. So we actually have in our serverless runtime, we have a DSL type of concept that allows you to say, if I wanted to have like a JSON file or a YAML file or something like that the user is authoring with, they can do that as long as there's a way to transpile that down to JavaScript. So, yeah.
Great questions, everybody. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.